Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED, and this is Q5M Radio. Today I'm joined by the WRTC team of DJ5MW Manfred and DM5EE Yuli, who finished second place at the WRTC 2026 in Wyboston. I'm really psyched that they were able to join me this morning on Sunday morning. Thanks for joining me, guys.
You're welcome. Thanks for
Hi,
having us.
Kevin. Nice to have you.
So I think it's always good to place everybody. Where are you today, Manfred?
Well, today I'm at a birthday party, and it was quite surprising to get the invitation on short notice. So I'm just away from the birthday party and going on later on.
So I promise you we won't keep you too long from the birthday party. Hopefully before the candles are lit, we'll have you off. And Yuli, where are you?
I'm at my home in northern Germany.
Well, as I was saying, it was really great for me to be in Wyboston and watch you guys. Before the camera started rolling, I was explaining to Manfred that it was very exciting to be back at Wyboston and watch you guys dominate the leaderboard all weekend long. But before we get into that, Manfred, could you give us a little bit of background about your experience at the WRTC? You're not a newcomer to this.
No, not really. This was my fifth WRTC. I was to Slovenia 2000 for the first time, as a youngster would say, ending up place 4, and then in Boston 2014, 2018 in Germany, and 23 in Italy. So quite some experience to have here, yeah.
So I'm curious, when you were putting together your plans for WRTC 2026, you obviously have a new teammate with Yuli. Tell me about that formation of the team, how that came about.
Stefan, DL1IAO, had to quit for personal reasons. He's too busy with the family and his job. And so I was in search of a new teammate. And there I had a look at the results of 2023. And Uli did a great job in Italy. So I just asked him if he wanted to join me as a new teammate. So that's the story.
So Uli, how did it feel to get that phone call to be paired up with one of the, I dare say, giants in contesting?
It actually wasn't a phone call. It was a conversation we had on the side of the Friedrichshafen ham radio event. And I immediately said yes. And then I thought, what am I getting myself into? Because these are huge shoes to fill. Stefan is a tremendous operator. And I was like, okay, can I achieve, similar results? Yes, it had worked out well in Italy. But still, in Italy, the conditions were maybe not as equal as it was in England. And so you couldn't be that sure. Yes, we finished in the top 10, but, still some uncertainty. So in the end, I was really relieved how things turned out.
So I think one of you, I think it was you, Yuli, who mentioned that Randy, K5ZD, in one of the contest crew segments had said the German team is always a threat. And he was certainly referring to you guys. And I think in part from what I've been able to ascertain, it's because of your skill level, but also just the amount of preparation you both do, particularly you, Manfred. So I'm curious what the preparation for WRTC 2026 looked like.
Yeah, you mean not the qualification process, but the preparation before.
The preparation after you'd qualified, right?
After the qualification, okay. So we had some meetings together. We met 2 times at my place. Uli had to drive quite a long distance to get here. About, is it 8 hours driving or something like that?
Roughly.
Yeah, and so we did 2 test contests at my QTH and set up the station. But the preparation was not so much work as expected because we were lucky to get the equipment loan from Stefan, DL1IAO. I could virtually get all of the equipment from Italy, and so it was easy not to have all these problems which you normally encounter when you have new rigs and about everybody knows it about the audio problems you get recording audio or sharing audio with the referee. That was all already solved, and we relied also on wind test. Maybe we are kind of dinosaurs in that aspect, but Stefan had done a lot of work to program scripts for wind test that made the user interface with the Elecraft K4 a lot better. So that was really one thing I wanted to maintain and to use it again in that WRTC. So all equipment was set, and then just was kind of routine operation. And of course, there was a lot of planning before, let's say, statistics and looking at logs from the past events and so on. I must admit, I gave this work partially to Uli because I was a little bit busy. Well, we are renovating my parents' house at the moment, so I had not so much time to dig into these details, also propagation forecasts and so on. And yeah, I gave this work a little bit to Uli to do this.
So Uli, please address that. Tell me about that work that you did.
Well, first coming back to the preparation, we also had a joint session at KC1XX as the 10-meter operators in CQ Worldwide 2025. And I think what helped me quite a bit was that I was got on my first D expedition this year. I was part of the Juliet 51 Alpha team. And so I had pileups for 3 weeks, which was great to experience. Yeah, with regards to preparation and strategy, well, we obviously looked at the logs. We looked at expected propagation charts that could tell us what it should be like. Now, I live on the same latitude as the test area in just 700 kilometers, so about 400 miles to the east. So the conditions weren't that big of a difference from what I'm experiencing here at my home. There were a few things that we had discussions about. In particular, where do we point the antenna? Because when you're in Central Europe, you can point it pretty much anywhere in your work stuff. But when you have to decide between the US and Europe, so the decision was we pointed to Europe initially, even if some US stations call in, because based on the propagation predictions, we were expecting them to call in later and be much stronger. I think that was a good choice, was a good approach. And yeah, well, lots of ideas we had. Eventually it came down to, I started on 20 and Manfred on 15. And after, I think, 2 hours, everyone was basically doing what they felt was the best thing to do.
I was going to ask that
we
question.
didn't have
So you had a
plan to follow. Yeah.
So you had a firm plan, but you deviated from the plan based upon conditions and.
There was no firm plan.
Okay.
It was basically, I mean, you have to be flexible, and I think that's key to the contest. Just, you know, when it feels right to do something else, to change bands or modes, I think that is when you have to do it and to try. And we tried lots of things, and sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't, like everyone did. But I think we had a good feel for the situation and what was worth maintaining and what wasn't.
So I definitely want to get more into the actual operating, but before we get there, talk to me about logistics of getting to Wyboston, getting your equipment there, and even get into the setup. Did that all go in a satisfactory way for you?
I think I can speak to it because I was the logistics guy in this case. I had a fully electric bus, so lots of space. That was a good thing, as it turned out. Also, the fully electric thing was not an issue. One of the things we had to define is how we would meet up. We wouldn't want to take the ferry with 2 cars. So we met in Belgium, actually, and Manfred parked his car in Belgium, and then we took the remainder of the trip in my car. I also had to receive all the gear before we took off because I had to present it to German customs. Because of the Brexit, we now had to go through customs procedures, and I presented everything we had to our customs, got a list stamped so that when returning to the European Union, we wouldn't have problems to declare what was already ours when we crossed the channel. Yeah, another thing was driving on the wrong side. Now, luckily, I lived in South Africa for 3 years, so that wasn't an issue. And yeah, when you look up WRTC statistics, you actually find Zulu Radio 2 Alpha in Italy, not DM5EE, because I was actually representing South Africa 3 years ago. But it all worked out. The only issue that I had was on the return trip where I forgot to pay the Dartford crossing in time. So now I'm awaiting a nice letter. I did pay, but 16 hours too late, and it seems they haven't taken the payment. So I'm waiting for a letter explaining that I need to pay a penalty or so. I don't know.
So I heard from many teams that having their own vehicle was a huge plus. So it sounds like that worked in your favor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For the space, and B, also for the flexibility, because we were not, we wouldn't have had enough time, and others have commented on this already, to set up on the first day. It took us longer to set everything up, and we would have the tranquility to do it. We didn't have to do it in a rush. We could return when we were done and not when the bus came to pick us up. So that was a huge benefit.
You know, one of the things that struck me about Wyboston was just this camaraderie amongst operators. I was there when people were starting to arrive, and a lot of hugs and smiles and conversation going on. And I'm curious from your perspective, since you've done this before, what that was like for you arriving.
Well, that's always kind of a pile up when you get there, and seeing all these guys. I don't know. You have sometimes not enough time, yeah, to greet everyone like you would. Yeah, and so you pass guys, you think, wow, that was K5ZD, and you talk to him later maybe, or yeah, there's so many guys to meet, and in first hand you do your registration and go through this process, so that takes also some time. Yeah, and afterwards it's nice to meet all these guys at the bar and so on, and have some conversations. That's a great part of it. And yeah, it was perfectly organized. We have to thank Mark and Georgina. I think that was one of the best WRTCs I have attended, and all was so excellent organized, and also the speeches in every competitor meeting, or the opening ceremony or closing ceremony. That was like one would expect to have it, just perfect, and with this sense of British humor also. I liked it very much.
We were lucky to arrive before the second bus got in, just a few minutes. So we didn't really have a pileup at the check-in, but then 5 minutes later there was a huge queue of, I don't know, 40, 50 people, all wanting to get registered. Other than that, yeah, it was a really nice location. I can only underwrite what Manfred has just said. One of the things obviously was the weather. There was some UK person said, yeah, we need no AC about 365 days per year. And it was just such an exception that it would be hot there. I had two really bad nights, but luckily the night before the contest was much better. It was a bit cooler, and I rearranged a few things, the fan and stuff. So other than that, I can only say it was really, really well executed. It was a lot of fun. And as Manfred said, just seeing everyone around was a real treat.
Well, clearly this was my first WRTC, and I've got to say, and I've said this publicly before, I regret not spending more time in the lobby. And I agree with you, Manfred. There were just so many people that it was tough to get to everybody, and obviously I was doing some videoing and photographing, so I had to get some editing done. But I was also around when that second bus arrived, and prior to that, I thought, okay, this is manageable. I was doing a lot of short clip interviews. Then all of a sudden, there's this rush of people, and it totally changed the dynamic. It felt a little bit overwhelming because I literally wanted to stop what I was doing and just say hello to people that I've interviewed and or heard about for years. But let's move on to the referee selection and the site draw. I think that's where things start to get really serious. Tell me about that for you, and hopping in your van and heading to the site. Tell me about that whole thing and what you experienced once you got to the site.
Well, that's always very exciting. In the last two WRTCs, I had the honor to being chosen quite early, and that means you have to to drive the farthest in the QTHs. And that's not always a good thing. So this time we were in the middle of the pack, and that was quite perfect. Yeah, having a QTH in the middle. I heard it in your Q5 video from Dan. So this is really an advantage when you are in the middle of the pack. You are able to work on ground wave stations on 10, 15, 20. You cannot hear them eventually if you are 30 miles away. So this is really something which adds to the score. But coming back to the selection, we were very happy to have Mike as our referee. I've never met him before personally, but of course on the bands, and Uli can add to that.
Yes, Mike was my referee in Italy, and he was the referee of the winners in 2018. So I thought this is a lucky charm. I was hoping that they would call up Mike, and it was, so that was fantastic. And as for the call sign, we had a few things that we hoped would not come true. No H, hopefully no S. I hate Juliet and Quebec on phone. And also the number 3 is a little difficult for maybe non-native speakers. And luckily all that did not come true either. So we were happy once we got the call sign revealed to us. But yeah, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little. We then first went to the QTH in the absolute middle of nowhere. I mean, I was like, okay, nobody, no building, nothing was visible around. We had a big water reservoir behind us, pretty close behind us, but it was to the south, so it wasn't an issue. But it was just quiet. It was remote. It was really, really good as a location. And we had a tall tree that was partially covering the tent. So we didn't have to deal as much with heat issues as maybe others had.
So let's get into the contest now. And you had mentioned, you had mentioned that you started in 2015, you're beaming Europe. Things shifted after a couple hours. Talk to me about that. I presume the rate was pretty aggressive right away. Again, as I pointed out, you guys got to the top of the leaderboard pretty quickly.
Yes. The plan was turn the radio on at 1200 Zulu, go to, or set it was set to some frequency at the lower band edge, and see if there's a clear spot and start calling. That's what we did, and it worked with both of us right away. First hour we had, I think, a 420-ish hour. I think I had 220, and Manfred had even still above 200 on 15, which isn't really very often, especially with the conditions that we're experiencing right now. And it kept working. I mean, I checked our hourly rates, and until the 00 hour, so until 13 hours after the start of the contest, we had rates above 280. And early on, I thought maybe I need to look for some multipliers, but at that rate, I wasn't willing to give up the runs, and I was only very rarely for 1 or 2 minutes trying to find something, because the runs would restart. It was very good. It was very motivating. It was a lot of fun to have these runs that were really lasting until late.
So at what point, Uli, did you have to start doing a little bit of S&P or move around? When I was talking to Randy, K5ZD, he had said that he went 12 hours straight, he and Tom, with good run rates, and then things slowed down. But what was it for you?
I think it was similar. I mean, yes, we would briefly look for something. Maybe you get on a new band, you first search and pounce a little until you settle for a frequency, hoping to find something on the way. But on the other hand, when you're running, you also have a lot of multipliers call you. So eventually it's a trade-off between QSO points and multipliers. And we were certainly biased a little towards the QSO points. But especially, we had more US stations than everybody else, it turns out, especially when you have an US run. And even if that is only, 120 an hour, that's a lot of money in the bank. And it's 5 pointers at that rate. Yeah, we knew we would probably not have the highest multiplier total, but it would pay off this way.
Many people have reported that it was a very cold night, and as you already pointed out, things slowed down. But what was the night like for you and Manfred up until sunrise?
Well, the night was, I would say, bearable. We had some blankets. Luckily, we had the advance warning in the meeting, competitor meeting, that it would be cold and we should prepare for that. So I had two blankets on the side that were sufficient to get through the night. Um, and yeah, so from that perspective, it was okay. Um, we didn't have any issues with the generator. We had some at the beginning initially before the contest. Turns out that, like many others, we hadn't opened up the venting system of the generator. So it would die after a while, but no issues there. We had one very significant problem. And at the beginning, I was really freaking out because my computer and also Manfred's would lock up about once per hour for, it felt like 2 minutes, maybe it was 90 seconds, but for a long time. Initially, I was rebooting or restarting WinTest every time, and then Manfred found out that you just have to wait it out. And that was an issue that all the users of WinTest experienced in this contest, and it was due to a problem with the network, which we never experienced. The problem was that the network was obviously with some sort of firewall or so for the computer that would transmit the QSOs, and it was found to be a bug in the software. But every hour you would have like 90 seconds, where maybe 2 minutes, where you couldn't do anything. If you were running, you could take pen and paper and write down the calls that would call you, and then type them in after the computer came back. That was a little disconcerting. But aside from that issue, we didn't really run into problems. There was some DQRM. For about half an hour, we had DQRM. Okay. We had a station following us with DITs, so you would move frequency, the station would follow you. We had a station calling CQ from ZL2 HQ on my frequency, which obviously ZL was on 40 meters. ZL was in pure daylight, so it wasn't real. It was way too loud and wasn't possible. We had a bit of that, but overall, I would say it was mild aside from that bespoken wind test issue.
Manfred, catching you up, we were just talking about the actual operating and the huge runs that you had for the first 12 hours, things slowing down, getting a little bit of cold in the evening, and moving towards sunrise. Anything to add? I know you weren't privy to what Yuli said, but you were there, so you probably know exactly what he said.
I'm not sure what he said already, but maybe I can just say something. I think what really was great were the great Sporadic-E conditions. I was always for WRTC praying for such good Sporadic-E conditions, and this time it worked out for the first time. So this was adding to the fun. So you had also during the daytime excellent pileups with Europe, and that was really great fun. So we did not expect such high rates, of course, and we had the antenna to Europe for the first 2 hours or so at least, and that paid off. I heard some others pointed the antenna to stateside in the beginning. Well, there is some opening, yes, but I always say stateside has the time later on. They have better propagation later, and their time will come. So this was about the conditions, and in the tent, that was very good, I think. We had we had the tree that covered our tent a little bit from the sun, but I live in southern Germany, so for me the heat is not maybe that problem compared to northern Germany. And just it was quite cool during the night. I had a sleeping bag, and I went with my feet into the sleeping bag for the night and had a jacket, so that was just fine for me.
Yeah. And to add with the antenna direction, at some point I felt we should turn it to the US. And I think I sent 2 or 3 messages via the chat, but Manfred did not budge. And I think it was the right decision not to do it at that point because we were still having huge rates with Europe. And yeah, so that worked out. And speaking of the night, at least I did not have any moment where I felt absolutely tired. The QSO rates were still motivating. I had 2 coffees, one around midnight and one in the morning, and I got through without really feeling, really tired. Of course, you get tired a little, but this deep dip where you feel like sleeping at a moment's notice. So that was also due to the very good conditions. It was just a lot of fun.
I've said a couple times as a spectator, you guys were dominating the leaderboard. I think that you didn't budge out of the top 3 during the final maybe 12 hours. That's my recollection at least. But I'm always curious, since you can't see the leaderboard, how competitors are feeling when you finally finished and before you actually saw your score and your standing. Were you feeling good about it? Did you feel as though you had dominated, or was there a feeling that you missed something?
I would not say dominated. We felt quite good, but it could have been also place number 10, so you never know. QSO wise, we had a good feeling, but multiplier could have been better. Normally, we do a lot more surge and pounds, but not this time because of the high rates in the beginning. So I think the first 13 hours were all above 300 combined. So you stick to it, and you don't want to give up such a run for multi-searching so easily. So in the morning, I told Uli via the chat, we need to catch up on multipliers. And so we tried to push that a little bit. And in the end, we made some more multipliers. But of course, QSO-wise, that was not so good in that moment. And people from outside, they said, what did you do the last few hours? You lost, but we cannot tell that we did something special or that something broke, or I don't know. It just was maybe the fact that we choose to search for multipliers, and the rates weren't as high as on Saturday anymore. Maybe we had already most of the Europeans in the log, and so it was not possible to do more. So we did nothing to be bad, It just happened in the end.
Yeah, I had we were struggling a little at the end to get something going. And I know that I very consciously thought 20 minutes before the end, what am I going to do? Couldn't really get a run on 10 meters or on 20 going, tried phone, tried CW again. Manfred was on 15, it was working okay-ish, but not really great. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm not going to do SSB. It's going to take too long before I get spotted, and I won't benefit from them, even if it was a good run for the last 10 minutes. And then I thought, I just go to 20 meters and I'll just be there, no matter what. We had 16, I think, well, maybe not 1600, but well over 1,000 QSOs on 20 CW, maybe 1,200 or so. So we should have worked everyone. And I got on the, pretty low in the band, called CQ, and then I worked 60 stations in 20 minutes. All of a sudden, there was a huge run at the very end. No idea why that happened. It was just phenomenal. So when I took off the headphones, I had a better feeling than I would have had had I not had this run. Overall, I remember in Italy, I had a very good feeling. I felt like this was good. This was great, and we finished sixth, which was a very good ending for a total newcomer team. This time, obviously, the expectations was higher, so I had no good feeling. Was that good enough or not? And I was so relieved when Mike told us after we had handed him the log and everything that he said, "You're in the top 3, and it's really, really close." So that was great.
Any one thing that you would do differently, knowing what you know now?
I don't think so. We were happy with our contest, how it worked out. I would say I would not do anything differently from this perspective now.
You know, since we've talked about the leaderboard a couple times, I'm curious how you guys felt about the World Radio League leaderboard and it being available to the public around the world. Was that a good thing for you?
We had lots of feedback from people who joined, who looked at it, who told us it was really exciting. So from that perspective, absolutely, it was motivating. I think even for the non-ham public, it was my family. They were glued to the screen. From that perspective, I think it worked out. One of the things I think we need to look at is whether there were ways to identify stations through the very sophisticated statistics that you could pull, like band maps of, or like a map of the world with the contacts by band. There, I'm not sure that such details should be given out, but the overall leaderboard was, I think, a great benefit.
So obviously, after the contest is over and you're back at Wyboston, we're not done yet. There's adjudication, there's the closing ceremonies. Tell me how that all wrapped up for you guys. And obviously, part of how that wrapped up is you're standing on the podium, which is so impressive. But tell me how that was for you through the closing ceremonies.
Oh, well, getting all the staff back to the hotel after 24 hours of contesting is quite exhausting. So I don't know if Uli told already. He took something to to do the driving back home. I'm very grateful that he did all the driving and the logistics for us, so I could relax a little bit. And well, we were not so tired. I think it was not very dangerous, but okay. He signed a waiver that he does it on his own risk. And getting back to the hotel, okay, everyone gives you a clap, oh, well done, and appreciates your effort. So that's always a good feeling coming back. And yeah, then later on, yeah, you go to the dinner and have some more conversations. Then you go to bed, and the next morning in the breakfast area, you meet eventually you meet also some guys of the judging committee. So, and they told us this time everything's fine, we are already done. There's no cheerleading detected, and you have a good feeling and think, okay, so this time all is okay. It's worked out, and well, the others were better, so we got on the podium. Maybe that's fine. So excellent, no problem. So that was on Monday, the whole day. I thought, well, excellent. We have a podium place, so that's fine. And yeah, with that feeling, we went to the closing ceremony. So I headed over to Uli now.
Yeah, Manfred is already used to getting on the podium. I wasn't. And it was, I mean, we were quite confident that we were in the top three, so it would be a podium place, but we had no idea it was 1, 2, or 3 because it was so close. And when it was announced that Brazzo and Sven were third, I even thought this is even better than I thought because I'm going to get at least a silver medal. And then it turned out to be that. And it was an unreal feeling to be on that podium and look into all the faces of the people that many of them I highly respect. I mean, they're fantastic contesters and do things that I don't think I could ever do. But here I was on the podium with Manfred. That was just amazing. So really happy, thinking fond memories of that moment.
Well, as I've said a number of times, you guys put on a great show for us spectators, and I really appreciate that. Any final comments before we wrap up and before we lose Manfred again to his birthday party?
Any additional info? We will see what will happen in the next few days. I do not want to go into details. That's part of another discussion. And well, I hope decisions will be made that maintain the integrity of WRTC and So we are all happy and can maintain next WRTCs under fair conditions again.
Well said. Yuli?
Yeah, well, real life took over really quickly. I'm currently struggling to finish the 3 tax declarations before the end of the month because it's tax day on the 31st. And then, well, I was commenting quite a bit about the topic that Manfred just touched on. So not much time to really think about and enjoy it. But overall, regardless of what happens, I will have very fond memories of WRTC 2026. And Manfred said it at the beginning. I'd like to emphasize that at the end, the organizers did a great job. The whole team, they were not staffed as big as we were in Germany, so there were a few shortages, but they managed to work around that. And overall, it was a fantastic experience we had in Wyboston. Thanks very much to everyone who was involved.
Well, I hope I can have you two back maybe in a couple weeks after some of this process unfolds, because I think it's really honorable of the two of you not to get into those topics now. We'll let it all play out. But most of all, I appreciate you took time today on a Sunday from your birthday party, Manfred, and from your tax filings, Yuli, to have this conversation. I know there's going to be a lot of people interested in hearing this perspective from you. You're got to be one of the most highly respected WRTC teams on the docket. And thank you for joining me.
Thanks. See you soon.
My name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED, and this is Q5 Ham Radio. Thank you for joining me. 73.